Welcome. In this video, we will discuss about the concept of one nation, one election. We will discuss what it is all about, why Prime Minister is focusing on it, what are its advantages, and are there any challenges in the present system of polity in India which does not let the one nation, one election become a reality. So we will discuss about all this in this video. Try to understand this topic is important from your GS paper 2 polity subject. So just try to understand what are the major constitutional provision, what are the advantages, what are the challenges, and that will be the most important things you would need to pick up from this video. So let's start. So, Prime Minister has talked about the One Nation, One Election recently while addressing the 80th All India Presiding Officers Conference via video conference at Kakadeya, Gujarat on the occasion of Constitution Day. So we know that 26th November was the day when the Constitution was signed and adopted, and that day is celebrated as the Constitution Day. So on the same day, Prime Minister has asked for the picture of one nation, one election. So he raised the pitch for the one nation, one election, a single voter list for all polls, and also asked the presiding officer to simplify the language of statute books and allow for an easier process to weed out redundant laws. So these are the things that he suggested, that there should be one election, one nation, so it should be a one election, a single voter list of for all polls along with the presiding officer to kind of make the statute book readable for the end user. So that is something which the Prime Minister has highlighted. Simultaneous elections were the norm until 1967. So this is the little bit of background that since 1967, it was actually the simultaneous election. The states as well as center used to have election at the same time. But following the dissolution of some legislative assemblies in 1968 and 1969, and that of Lok Sabha in the December of 1970, elections of state assemblies and parliament have been held separately. So because of the dissolution, this is what actually triggered that dissolution happened, and after that the election need to be happen, and because of it there has been a mismatch in the way simultaneous election could be held for the parliament as well as for different state assemblies. The idea of reverting to simultaneous poll was mooted in the annual report of the Election Commission in 1983. So, Election Commission way back in 1983 again asked that the whole system should revert back to the case of simultaneous election. After the PM floated the idea once again in 2016, Niti Aayog prepared a working paper on the subject in 2017. So, 2017 a working paper has already been prepared by the Niti Aayog looking at the feasibility of the simultaneous election. So now let's try to understand what is this exactly is. One nation, one election, what does it means for you and me? So the idea of one nation, one election is basically the idea that simultaneous election to be held for parliament, all state assemblies and to the local bodies in India. So this is the idea that all kind of elections starting from the center to the local bodies, it should be held in one go. It's like it should be simultaneous. It should not be like the we what is the case in today's world that we have different states go into election at different times, then there is a general election for the parliament, then local bodies also have election. So more along the line there is somewhere or the other some kind of election is going on. To get away from this like always in election mode process, one nation one election is something which has been recommended. This would mean that instead of having several elections happening across the country every year, election will be held only once in 5 years, either in a single phase or more practically in multiple phases. So even now, if you know that for the big state, it's actually in multiple phases the election happen. So similarly, it could be like the people could go for electing at the center, at the state, but it is like done in phases so that the population could be dispersed. The Law Commission of India has asked to prepare a report in 2018 on simultaneous election and their feasibility by the Government of India. So in 2017 it was Niti Aayog which came up with the paper. Then in 2018 Law Commission also looked at the feasibility and it submitted its report which says it is in favor of one nation, one election. So Law Commission is also in favor of one nation, one election. However, it also is stressed that the simultaneous elections are not possible unless they are amendment to the constitution or to the other laws. So this is the constraint as of today. With the present constitutional provision or the laws which are in place, it is not possible to hold the simultaneous election. It will become ultra vires. So as of today, the government cannot go ahead and conduct a one nation, one election. In this video itself, we will discuss what are the contention issues. Now let's move forward and try to understand why one nation and one election has been supported by Niti Aayog, Law Commission, even Election Commission way back in 1983. So what are the advantages? First of all, the cost of conducting elections. Party expenses can be reduced and public money can be saved. We know that the election in India is a very costly affair. So from that regard, if it is held only once in 5 years, it will definitely mean the saving of the public money. Then the efforts of administration and security forces can be reduced. Like for an example, whenever there is an election for booth, there has to be like presiding officer, they will be scheduled. Then the security guards have to be in place. So all these things put extra effort. So administrations is generally done by the teachers. So instead of like going to school and teaching student, they have to go to the election booth and preside over the election process. Similarly, security force are also constrained. So this will also reduce their workload. This will provide more time to the Election Commission of India, paramilitary forces, police, etc. to prepare for the election. Again, Election Commission of India will also get more time in hand if it is like not every day some election is happening. It will help elected governments and ruling parties focus on the governance instead of preparing for elections in different part of the country. So we know that right now, for an example, our ruling government keeps on in election mode. They have to go and do a rally at various states because of the state assembly election. So they kind of took away the thing from governance. The focus could be shifted. So if there is like only one election in every 5 years, the government could also focus more on the governance. The model of conduct, so basically model code of conduct is something which means that whenever there is an election, the candidate should not promise anything or there should not be any incentivizing schemes being announced. So this kind of model code of conduct get implemented before the election, which will put in place whenever elections are to be conducted, would lead to policy paralysis. So this is what happens because now you cannot have a scheme which is actually could be looked at that you are breaking the model code of conduct. It means that it will eventually lead to policy paralysis. No new scheme is coming up, nothing is going forward. So such kind of thing also get triggered because of the model code of conduct could be reduced or stopped when there is only one election happening every 5 years. Usually when political parties have to focus on upcoming elections, SOPs are given which leads to the rise in fiscal deficit. So again we know that certain kind of promissory investments or these schemes are launched just before the election, and because of it, it could lead to more fiscal deficit, like the government expenditure could skyrocket. Invariably, fiscal deficit, which is in relation to revenue expenditure, will have a negative impact on the overall fiscal outlook for the economy. So again, this thing could actually means that the government is not following the fiscal discipline, and it could lead to a macroeconomic instability. So this is again bad for the economic perspective also. Although the logistical cost of EVMs will be higher, the report of the Law Commission of India in 2018 on the feasibility of one nation, one election has told that the additional costs will be evened out on the long run. So even though right now, because the EVM are reused, like when the general election happen or when the state election happen in various state, EVMs are reused. But if like it's a simultaneous election, the sheer number of EVMs which would be required to conduct the election will be a lot, and it will require a lot of investment. But a feasibility report says that in long run these costs will be evened out. So these are the major advantages of one nation, one election. Now let's also try to understand what are the disadvantages or why there is an opposite side to the debate which says that one nation, one election should not be proceeded with. For holding simultaneous election, the requirement of VVPATs, which is EVM, and your VVPATs will double, as the ECI has to provide two sets, one for election to the Legislative Assembly and second to the Lok Sabha, hence increasing the logistical efforts as well as security efforts. So we just discussed that the sheer number of EVM or even the VVPATs which will be required would be almost doubled and even could be more than that. So in that regard, logistical cost or the initial investment could be more. Synchronization between the various level of government and the houses of legislature will be an issue considering the existing tradition and convention of the Indian parliamentary system. So this is again one of the major contention, in fact, is actually the present form of polity which is practiced in India. So the parliamentary system and the laws and norms which are in place does not allow for the simultaneous election. If center and state election are held simultaneously, chances are that the regional parties will have a disadvantage as the national issues tend to overshadow the regional issues. When a voter thinks of national and state issues at the same time, it tends to take away the visibility of the gains made by regional parties over the year and favor national parties. So this is again one of the major contention point which has been muted by the various regional parties, that if simultaneous election is happening, it's more along the line that what the voter has decided at the center level, they will also go ahead and mark the same choice in all probability for the state as well, which means that the regional parties, the kind of effect they have could be narrowed down. So this is a major issues from the regional parties. The characteristics of the prevalent parliamentary form of government in India will pose a hurdle to the implementation of one nation, one election. Considering the basic feature that the government is accountable to the lower house and hence the government can fall before completing its term, requiring fresh elections. So all these things again, it's not like that, okay, after considering everything changing, every kind of system which is existing today, you were able to conduct a simultaneous election. But the present parliamentary form of government, which means that the executive need to be responsible to the legislature, could mean that no confidence vote could be passed against them in the parliament, which could lead to dissolution. What will happen then? Similar things could happen in the state assembly. So even though if at all the cost and all practicality at once, one time simultaneous election was held, but it was no way the confirmation that the next election would be held only after the 5 years because of the parliament form of system. Governments could fall in within the 5 years time scale also. Then what will happen? These are the major issues related with the one nation, one election. Now let's quickly also see the constitutional provision associated with it. So we have Article 83 and 172 of the Constitution, which guarantees 5 years to every elected Lok Sabha and Assembly member respectively. So for every MP and MLA, apart from the time when they are disqualified, it actually gives them 5 years of tenure. Unless sooner dissolved, will have to be amended, considering that fresh election will require to be held right after dissolution. So this is again something which need to be done, that Article 83 and 172 need to be amended, because it means that every MLA or MP need to have 5 years, which is not possible in the case of simultaneous election. Then there is Article 85 and 174, which stipulate that the intervening period between the last session of the House of the People or state legislative assemblies and the first session of the subsequent assembly shall not exceed 6 months. So the time period between the new government is formed or the previous government held, the session should be like only the maximum time period allowed is 6 months. So in that regard, again, this condition will now pose an issue, as there could be a hung assembly, parliament, fall of government due to no confidence motion, or even death or removal of a representative before the end of their tenure. So again, what will happen? How the 6 months maximum time period, which is between the one session to the other, is there, how that is maintained. So these provisions will also need to be tinkering around. Then we have Article 356, which deals with the precedent rule or the state emergency. Again, that may need to be amended, as it comes into force only if there is a failure of constitutional machinery in a state. So the only provision under which a precedent rule could be invoked is when the state government has failed to do its constitutional duty. In that regard, for simultaneous election, how would you resolve them? So again, if one nation, one election is in place, then the president's rule will require to be put in place for the sake of simultaneous election. Again, resolution need to be happen. Otherwise, there is no way with the all the variation we have in the elections that are fought today. It is very difficult to hold the simultaneous election. And then finally, the 10th schedule of the constitution, which talks about the anti-defection law, will have to be reconsidered to increase the surety of continuous governance for 5 years if the ruling party does not have a large mandate. Again, more strict or more restraint need to be put under the anti-defection law so that the party could actually rule for the 5 years and it does not lose the motions, like for an example, no confidence motion. So all these things considered, even though the one nation, one election does have a lot of benefit, as of today with the kind of government we have, constitutional provisions we have in place, it looks very difficult. So all these articles we just mentioned need to be amended. Apart from that, the regional parties need to be onboarded, and then again we also have the concept of federal character, that how these election could actually hamper the federal character of our Indian polity. So these are the major things that you need to know. This topic is important from your polity perspective. So if you have any doubt, feel free to drop a comment. Thank you.